Lord, I give you my will and I want you to replace it with your will. Right. And so I have to kind of trust that is what's going on and that our wills are one and the same.
Welcome to the Discerning Mother, the podcast for Jesus-loving moms who want to tune out the noise and tune into God's design for motherhood. I'm Bridget Tibaldi, a board-certified women's health coach, holistic health practitioner, birth nerd, and homeschooling mom of 5. I help moms to heal their minds and bodies, trust their instincts, and embrace the beauty of the way God created them. Here we talk about birth, hormones, motherhood, faith, and anything else. Let's go. All right. Welcome back to the Discerning Mother podcast. I'm here with Laura Jean, and I'm super excited to chat. Many of you may actually know all of what she has going on, but I'm so excited to hear it from her own mouth and to just let her tell us exactly what's going on. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, it'll be so fun. Okay, so again, I know a little bit about you. I've listened to your podcast many times. Your website is absolutely beautiful. But for those of you who don't know who you are, can you give a little intro about yourself?
Yeah, I would love to. The long story short is I'm a Catholic millennial woman myself, and I have just a heart for helping people become who they were created to be so that they can lead the lives that they were created to lead. And for a lot of us, that looks like marriage as the vocation that we choose and go down that path. And so I do a lot with intentional formation for the vocation of marriage, but in a broader sense, right? Helping individuals become the person that they were created to be, not who your neighbor was created to be or, someone on the other side of the world, but the mission that God has given you, helping them discern that and really draw that out in their life.
Yeah, no, and that's so beautiful. And I think it really speaks to, it's really helpful because there's so much noise in the world today. And it's you don't even know what your own mind is saying.
Yeah.
Let alone what God's trying to whisper into your mind.
So true.
Just having that space, like you said, to help women and probably men to discern, what do I want versus what the world is telling me to want. Mm-hmm. And then even more, obviously what does God want is super, super important too.
Yeah. Did you know that the word desire actually means of the Father?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Isn't that so cool?
I know. And that's one of the things I'm trying to be more intentional about it, to use the words desire versus want in different, in the correct ways, because whenever I did hear that, I was wow, that makes so much sense.
Yeah. And so a lot of times, the things that are really on our hearts, I don't know about you, but growing up Catholic, we have this thing called Catholic guilt,
Yeah.
And sometimes it can get in the way of well, I feel like I want this, but I don't know if that's God's plan for me, right? So if we look at what the word desire is, truly what it means, it can really help us discern okay, is this coming from the Father? Because a lot of times it is, especially if it's a really, really deep desire that we can't exactly explain everything about it. A lot of times that's something that was given to us.
Yeah. So good. Okay. So with that in mind, because I get asked a lot from my own clients who are I'm really struggling with trusting myself and trusting my instincts and everything. So can you speak to that idea of desire versus want and maybe touch on the instincts a little bit?
Yeah, that's a really good question. For me, I feel there's obviously a difference, right? Mm-hmm. Wants can sometimes come from our desires. They can be elements of what we truly desire. I think of them kind of desire something really big and deep, and a want is maybe smaller and more shallow. Okay. So it could be part of a bigger desire, or it could be something that you're coming up with that's maybe selfish or has its roots in something else. Mm-hmm. Right. And a lot of times how I try to differentiate the two in my mind is through time, if that makes sense. So if there's something that you want and then you say, okay, let me think about it for a week. Okay. And if I still want it at that point, let's figure it out, right? Because a lot of times with desires, they're there for good, right? So you'll still have that want, that desire over an extended amount of time, right? Where it's kind of like we live in this world of instant gratification. Oh my gosh, it's everywhere.
Wow.
And so a lot of times there'll be little things that pop up and like, yeah, I really want that, right? And it might be like this huge feeling. A lot of times our feelings kind of trip us up because they can kind of trick us to feel like something is more important than it really is. So these feelings come up and they're like, oh, I need this thing right now. Whereas if you give it a little bit of time, a lot of times those feelings go away. They diminish over time if they're not rooted in something deeper. And so that's kind of how I differentiate in my mind between the two.
Yeah, no, and that's so good. Time.
Yeah.
Because I'm just thinking of one client in particular. She is a mom of a little boy, and she has all of these desires to raise him a certain way, but there's so much noise in the world that she's like, am I doing things wrong? Is this wrong? Am I doing this right? Like, I don't even know what to believe anymore. And it's been a while that we've been like talking about this and working on this. And I think what you just said is perfect, where it's like she's still had these desires after months and months of working together. So therefore, what's inside of her is likely from the Father, not just like of her own making. So it's just now a matter of figuring out what are the tools and strategies that she needs in order to really make those desires come to life in a fruitful and sustainable way.
Yeah.
So I think that was perfect. Okay, so let's back up like a tiny little bit to a little bit of logistics, just because I know some people are going to be curious. Like, where in the world are you? Are you married? Are you single? Do you have kids? Like, a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so fun. I am in Buffalo, New York. So currently we are still in like false spring is what
I know,
call
right?
it. We had like a few nice days and then it's like freezing again. And I'm like, okay, I thought we were over this. But so that's where I live in the Arctic North. And I am single. I don't have any children of my own, but I'm an auntie to 14, and it is so fun. Yes. And I like to say, you know, for women especially, we have this, we're made to be mothers, right? So we have this like nurturing desire in our hearts. And what I tell a lot of single women is that, listen, like, we can still live this out in such a profound way, even if we're not mothers yet ourselves, you know? And so I'm able to do that with my family, and that's lovely, family and friends. And yeah, I live here in the North. It's just me, but it's great. And I really try to build up the community around me as much as possible because we're made for community.
Yeah, and I think that's so beautiful what you're saying is that we all have this idea of like spiritual motherhood in our minds.
Yeah.
Well, if you've been around the Catholic world long enough, you probably have at least. And one thing that came to mind whenever you were saying that is that like sometimes, even though I'm a mom of 5, like I almost need somebody to like mother me. Yes. And sometimes that the best times that has happened are whenever I have this one girlfriend in particular who doesn't have any children, but she comes over and she like plays with my kids, and I can just see like the joy that exudes out of her. And I'm like, that's what I'm supposed to be feeling. And like, obviously I'm joyful with them, but like, it's just, she brings this new, like renewed joy. And it's just like, it's so beautiful to see that. And it just makes me want to be better because I can see that she is like enjoying it so much. And I just think that was, it's such.
Yes. The different perspectives is so important. And I hear this a lot too, especially with multi-generational friendships. Yeah. Like, you know, finding a mentor or a friend who is, you know, in the next or multiple next seasons ahead of you to really just do life with them because they can speak so well into your season of life. And you also serve them by bringing youth and vitality and wonder about the world and things like that, where,
Yeah.
maybe they don't experience that as much on a daily basis. And so it's really important. And I know, like, with the school system nowadays, everyone's like, you're with your age group,
Yeah.
right, from a young age. And then we're taught to just kind of stick with that, where there is so much wisdom and just amazing things to be gained from having intergenerational friendships.
Yeah, for sure. And I know that I'm going to sound like a broken record, but like this idea of needing community, because again, a community doesn't mean all 25-year-olds, doesn't mean all 30-year-olds, doesn't mean all 35-year-olds. It means a community, which is diverse, and we all have something to bring to it. So the energy that a 20-year-old might bring to it is different from the energy that a 75-year-old might bring to it, but they can really balance each other, and also they can feed off of one another. And that's
Absolutely.
just, it's so needed. And again, just unfortunately not something that we have so much nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
With that in mind, so you wear a lot of different hats with being an entrepreneur. You're very creative. You have your own podcast and speaking. So like, how do you balance all of that while staying true to your calling and also just being true to being a daughter of Christ?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do you balance all that?
I think it really comes down to really solid roots.
Mm-hmm.
Because like a tree, if you think of like a tree, there can be, a branch that kind of goes towards the east a little bit, and you can have a really tall branch. You can have like a little stubby branch over here, and so I kind of see it kind of like that, where everything that I do, everything that I spend my time doing and who I spend my time with, it's all like, it's all connected, because we as people are so integrated, and we're called to be integrated with our faith as well. And so I don't see it as something separate from like work life or family life, right? It is the thing that informs how I live life, right? And so I kind of see it that way. In terms of like keeping it all balanced, I don't do that well. Okay, let's be really honest. Like, there are some weeks where I'm like, I haven't spoken to a soul because I am just crushing work.
Yeah.
And there are some weeks where I'm, on duty or something, and I'm just like totally in on that. And that's honestly what's so great about free will is that you can adjust and do different things. We're not robots, right?
Yeah.
And as much as balance is kind of like this ideal thing, I don't really know how, like, if it's true, like if anyone really achieves balance in the way that we're all striving.
Yeah, for sure. Hearing that, because I get asked all the time, like, you have 5 kids, how do you do all of it? And I'm like, I don't.
Yeah.
Some days, some weeks I have like literally like 5-6 days of laundry ready to go that need to be done, and I just like can't make myself do it. Versus other weeks I'm like, laundry every single day, it's done. Mm-hmm. But one thing that you touched on there that I personally struggle with, and that I know that a lot of moms and women in general struggle with, is this idea of presence. So you mentioned like there's a week whenever you're like head down in work doing stuff, and then there's also this week whenever maybe you are with your 14 nieces and nephews. Like, how do you, I'm asking for myself personally, like how do you maintain that joyful presence so that no matter where you are or what you're doing, like those people in front of you, whether that is clients or that you're working with, or whether that is your nieces or nephews, whomever it is, like how do you make sure that they're getting the best version of you?
That is such a good question. Like, if we were to rank questions, it's like the most important, like someone can ask, because truly I think that presence is like the biggest gift you can give someone is to be fully present to them. Like, truly. Like, we hear stories. I don't know if you've ever heard these stories about like JP2 or Mother Teresa. Mm-hmm. And people just say like, when you met them, right? For example, JP2, like he's the literal pope. Like he has like a bajillion things he has to do. And people have said like I met him and it seemed like I was the only person in the world to him. Like he was so laser focused on me and like this he was just so present and that's always stuck with me. And I also notice in my own life when I'm able to be more grounded, more present, right? I am just better. Like I'm a better person and I'm able to receive the other person in front of me a lot better. So your question is like, how do we do this? Honestly, I think two things, okay? I'm all about the practicals. So the first thing is like, it's kind of like a muscle that you have to like work out. And so practice being present with the Lord, honestly.
Oh, yeah.
Like with, spending time in silence and being just super present, it is hard. It's very hard at the beginning, especially if you don't have this muscle that's strengthened yet. But it is beyond, like your return will be beyond anything that you could imagine. I read this great book. It's by Cardinal Sarah, and it's called The Power of Silence.
Oh, yes. So good.
Life-changing. And, in it, he's talking about in the silence is where we meet God, but it's also where God meets us. It's the language that he speaks. And it's the language that he put into all of us to speak to him. But the thing about noise is it's a distraction, right? And so what is the devil going to use? It's going to use noise to distract us from being silent and being present with the Lord. A lot of us, we ask the Lord for like a big sign or like, tell me. And it's like, he's there. He's so much closer to us than we imagine. And we have to be disciplined enough to take ourselves out of the noise of the world and be present in silence to him long enough for us to receive what it is he's trying to give us. Truly.
Yes. Okay. So I remember whenever I was younger and even more recently, there have been priests who say, like, not even more recently, whenever I was younger, there have been priests who say, like, you should be spending a minimum of 1 hour a day in prayer. And I remember when I was little being like, 1 hour? Like, and I'm talking like I was like 8 or 9, 10 years old. And I'm like, that's a long time. What am I supposed to do? Just sit there?
Yeah.
And now, though, I like crave that hour. And whenever I can get even 20 minutes of adoration in, I'm like, this is the best thing ever. Mm-hmm. So what you were saying about like the devil using noise as a distraction, 100%, 100%, especially because I hear so many people, and myself included, who say like, oh yeah, I just put this on as I'm working in the background just to have some noise. And even with that, it's like, but what we were just talking about presence, it's like you're not truly present because your ear's always listening for that other thing.
100%.
And again, I'm guilty of this as well, so I'm not judging anybody. But I think that that's something that is really important to consider is like, why are we so uncomfortable with that silence?
Mm-hmm.
And
well, for a lot of us, it's where we have to confront ourselves.
Yeah.
And that is scary. It really is. The things that we've been pushing down, the things that we've been, in our subconscious, I'll deal with this later, all the uncomfortable feelings, all of that stuff. Like I notice for myself, if I am really uncomfortable being quiet, like, you're sitting at the doctor's office in the waiting room and like, you can't sit for 30 seconds without taking out your phone. Like that is a huge signal to me to spend more time in silence dealing with whatever it is.
Yeah.
So that I'm not avoiding it. Right. Yeah. That's so.
Yeah. And one thing that just popped into my mind is like, again, I work with moms who are probably thinking like, yes, I would love to have silence, but I don't even know how to get to get silence around me. And, I'll tell you some of the things that I say, and then I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too. Mm-hmm. Of like, I get it. We have lots of kids, lots of responsibilities, but being intentional about silence doesn't mean that like everything is silent. And you might be like, that doesn't make any sense. But hear me out.
Makes total sense to me.
Where it's like you're in the car driving, I don't know, the kids to school or to the grocery store, wherever it is that you're going. Instead of automatically turning on the radio or turning on the podcast to listen to, you just sit there. And the kids might be behind you, like singing or screaming or doing whatever they're doing. But you are just sitting here attempting to be silent. And I really believe that whenever you at least like try to do that, God is going to find you in that place where you are.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the biggest things that I always hit home is like, if you have the ability to potentially have silence, take it, even if it's not silent, like take that time that it could be silent and he'll work with it. But what are your advice? What's your advice about that?
Yeah, I love that so much because it's so true. And in the book, The Power of Silence, he talks about like when we think about silence, we think about like quiet.
Yeah.
Right? But he says it's like so much more than that. Like it's an interior quieting of our minds and of our hearts. So you can get to this point of silence in terms of this communing with God in this silence while there's noise around. And for most of us, that is like the norm, you know, we live in community, we live in family, like we have kids around, like that's how we have to think about it. Because if we think about it in terms of, oh, well, I have to achieve like 0 decibel silence.
Yeah.
That's impossible. Mm-hmm. Well, with God, all things are possible, but it is very unlikely. And we will be working towards that and working towards that and working towards that instead of having this idea of this interior quietness, this interior quieting of our minds and of our hearts that is much more achievable because we can control that versus we can't always control the physical noise around us, right? Mm-hmm. And so by focusing more on what we can control, that is going to bear way more fruit than, well, we can't start this process of being quiet if we don't have silence.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that kind of goes back to the idea of like we all have this ideal of what we want our prayer life to look like, what we want like our morning routine to look like. And even if you don't have kids, like a lot of times that kind of goes out the window because
absolutely.
It would be really nice to wake up to the birds chirping and the sun out and like this beautiful imagery that at least I have in my mind. And I go and sit in like my little chair in front of the fire and everything's beautiful and quiet and like calm. But that never happens. And there's beauty in that, even though it is really hard. But just going back to the idea that like, even though it doesn't look like what I think it should look like, there is still beauty and good that comes from it, even by just attempting to do those things.
Absolutely.
So especially with like the rosary, I talk to clients about this all the time of like, they want to pray a rosary. They know how fruitful it can be. It is. But they are like, I just can't even figure out how to sit down and pray because my kids are screaming and like crazy around me. And so one thing I always say is like, just sit down and do it. Even if they're nuts around you, they're eventually going to be like, oh, mom's sitting down and being quiet. Like it might take a few years to like to that point, but like just keep doing it because eventually good things, like it does change things.
Yeah, totally. And I know I'm not a mom, so maybe I don't have the credentials to offer this piece of advice too, but you can invite your kids into that too.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You know, my parents, we prayed a family rosary every night. Mm-hmm. And, you know, that was our bedtime routine. And we just knew like in the evening, there was nothing else that we did. We all prayed a rosary together. The youngest one's falling asleep, you know, but like nothing could break that routine of ours.
Yeah.
You know, we come home a little bit later, we still do it. You know, all those things. And that's powerful. Like your children need to learn how to be quiet too. Like not just be quiet, but this interior peace and quiet. And I mean, there's just a stark, we're going down this rabbit hole, okay? There is just this stark difference between like growing up as a kid in the 90s versus today. Just simply the amount of stimuli that kids are exposed to. So now more than ever, as we're thinking about as adults, we need silence, interior presence. We also have to recognize that our children need that too.
Yeah.
Right. And I know from witnessing it, that's way harder to do than to say, but it is so worth it.
Yeah, no, that it is it's a good reminder. First off, I love to hear that your family did that and that you are still a
proponent.
Yes, that you love Jesus still and that you're still in the church, because we do that with our kids every night, where we say a rosary every single night. We have for the last, I think it's almost 6 years now. And a lot of nights I'm like, is this even doing anything? What's the point of this? They're being crazy, doing whatever.
Goofing off.
Yes. Yeah. But so to hear you say that it did work and that you had this routine and it made a difference in your life, thank you for saying that. And then I was also going to say that that's another thing that kind of keeps me going whenever I personally don't want silence. I want to listen to something just to make my mind shut off and think about something else.
Yeah.
And what I always come back to with that is I'm not doing it for myself, because if I were to do it for myself, I would turn the radio on or turn on a podcast to listen to. I'm doing it for my children who need to see me modeling that I'm being quiet and still and listening. So that's another thing that I always talk about too with clients is if you can't do it for yourself, do it for your kids. Yeah. Because you are doing it for yourself. But if that's not enough of a motive, do it for them so that they can see oh, mom needs quiet time too.
Yeah.
And not even just your kids, do it for anybody else. If you have a sibling who you really want to pray the rosary, but they don't do it, be that model for them, even if you don't feel like doing it.
Yeah, because you're doing two things. You're being the model, but you're also doing the thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's benefits both.
Yeah.
Both of them have great benefits.
For sure. Okay. I want to go back a little bit because you touched on a really great point that I think would be great to dissect a little bit, where you mentioned most of us ask for this big sign, but we don't ever get the big sign. So let me throw a hypothetical situation at you just to see how, what your wisdom would say to this. If a woman is trying to make a decision between, I'll just say 3 things. All of the 3 things are good. None of them are going to be a bad decision. They're all good. They will all lead her closer to God. They will all lead
her. Those are the hardest decisions,
I know.
By the way, between good things.
That's why I'm giving you this scenario.
Okay.
So 3 things, they all lead to good things. They will all lead closer to God. They will all lead to bringing more people into the church, everything like that, just based on the way that this person will be living. And this woman does not know what the right choice is. Because again, all of them are good. And at one point she felt like all of them were the right thing. Yeah. And now there's this messy middle where it's everything's all boggled together and she doesn't even know what it is that she believes. And she knows that there's...
You in my brain, because I feel this. Okay, yes.
And she knows that there's these tiny whispers, but sometimes she hears one and she's like, oh, I don't really like that answer. Or was that you, God, or was that just me thinking that? Mm-hmm. So what would you say to any woman, doesn't have to be a mom, just any woman who has this mess in her mind of trying to discern between 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, many things?
Do I have permission to be very bold here?
Oh, yes, please.
Okay. I say this out of so much love. And this is one of those lessons where I learned the hard way. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Sometimes, especially as women, and especially as Catholic or Christian women, we can delay God's plan for us by over discerning. Okay. I've done it. It's painful when you realize that and you're like, I could have started this a while ago. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And something that super helped me figure that out and to just boldly walk into a path, and trusting that it's the right one, is this quote from St. Joan of Arc. Don't know if you've ever heard it, but she says, act and God will act. And I love that so much, because the way that I see discernment is there's a piece of it that is prayerful. There's a piece of it that's logical. There's a piece of it that is, gaining advice from other people. Like there's a lot of info gathering stage, you know what I mean? And then when it comes time to then choose, I think what happens a lot of times is we're so caught up in what is the right thing that we forget to choose a thing.
Yeah.
And the decisions between good, and good are the hardest ones, because it's not oh, this is not for me because it's not good, right? That would be such an easy decision. And so at some point you have to, with all of the info gathering, right, you have to sit down and just choose and trust the Lord that what you choose, he will use for good.
Yeah.
The best good. And the best thing you can do is just to choose and to trust him, and not delay. I mean, I've done it countless times where I've just delayed and delayed and delayed. And what happens too is this interior, frustration, because it's just it's a choice that hasn't been made. It's just this big unknown, where if you start going down a path, right, you say yes to this one and you say no or not now to the other two, and you're going down this path. Here's the other thing too. Okay. Here's the other thing too. Disruption always follows intention. Okay. I don't know if you've ever heard that, but once you hear it, you can't unhear it, right?
I know, right?
And it's so true. Any path you go down, you will find, in Matthew, when Matthew 7, when there was a wise man who built his house on rock and there was a foolish man who built his house on sand. For both of them, the wind and the storm came. The wind and the storm will come. It depends on how you heard and did what you were supposed to do with what you heard, right? Hearers and doers of the word. That's the point that Matthew was trying to make in Matthew 7. Yeah. But the point is how we prepare and how we have the intention going forward. So no matter what path you go down, right, there will be something. There'll be an obstacle. There will be disruption. And for a lot of us, especially in our culture of instant gratification, we'll come upon an obstacle or, a little bump in the road, and we'll say, oh no, was that a sign I shouldn't have chosen this? Okay. Has anyone ever felt that? Because I am. And that is, it's disruption. That's what it is. And a lot of times people will give up, change course, do whatever. And I'm not saying that that is always the wrong thing to do, but for a lot of us, it's just, we have to push through. We have to keep going because disruption will follow intention. And that does not mean that it's the wrong thing. A lot of times it means you're on the right track, honestly. Yeah. So that was much more than what you asked for, but I hope that made sense.
Yeah, no, that's so good. And I always do try to remember that, disruption follows intention. And like you said, to know that if you are on the right path, a lot of times there are going to be stumbling blocks and things that get in the way, whether those be from God to refine you, but they can also be from the evil one who really want to trip you up and make you doubt yourself, make you doubt God, kind of bring you into this place of doubt. And what God wants.
Right. Or it comes through other people,
sure.
Doubting you or whatever. And I mean, this is the tale as old as time. The Lord told us this: following me won't be easy. You will be persecuted. Not only will the journey be hard, but there will be people who actively try to stop you. And I think in some of our minds, we think of obstacles and people as different things. Mm-hmm. right? Like obstacles are like, I don't know, maybe a financial obstacle or like legal or something like that you just have to like figure out, or maybe it kind of stops you. And then there's another camp over here of like your community deserting you maybe
Yeah.
for the choices that you make, or people not understanding, or random people online saying nasty things about you. And it's like they're not different. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's what the Lord is talking about when he said this will be hard, you know?
Yeah. And one thing that my husband actually told me this morning, because he uses the Hallow app, and I guess it's their quote of the day. And I just had to look it up because I was thinking right about this. Suffering is the greatest treasure on earth. It purifies the soul. In suffering, we learn who our true friend is. So, Saint Faustina. And I think that that's really beautiful to keep in mind, because so many of us, myself included, don't want to suffer. Because suffering is hard. Whether that be physical suffering, mental suffering, whatever type of suffering it is, suffering is hard. And whenever I heard that, it was like, and I know this logically, but I always have to be reminded of it. Like, suffering is actually good because we can unite that suffering to Jesus on the cross. We can like lay it at his feet and he can deal with it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that that's really important to remember, like everything that you were just mentioning. And so what does discernment look like for you in your daily life? And like, how do you personally hear and trust God's voice?
That's a good question. It comes in different forms, as it often does, you know? In this season of my life, a lot of it comes down to trusting myself and to continue to trust what God has already put in motion. Does that make sense? Because sometimes we are on our journeys and then we're like, okay, God, like, what are we doing here? And he's already kind of answered that, you know? And we're just being impatient and we're just being like, okay, this isn't where I thought I would be, right? So I find myself there a lot of times in this season. And so it's just continuing to trust the plan he's already put in motion and to also recognize that it's far bigger than me, which does two things. It really helps me like not put too much pressure on myself. You know, like I have prayed this prayer since I was young. Like, Lord, I give you my will and I want you to replace it with your will. Right? And so I have to kind of trust that is what's going on and that our wills are one and the same. You know, of course, I'm continually refining and like trying not for it not to be selfish, but it is some like a true like deep desire of mine. And so if I'm leading with that and I'm leading with, you know, always checking with him, like, hey, are we I'm good? Like, you know, it's like a GPS. It's like, turn right in 200 yards. It's like, is that still are we still following this GPS, right? And so, yeah, that's what it looks like a lot for me. And I think that a lot of times we can overcomplicate it and think like, you know, there's a couple big questions we have to answer in life, right? Well, we all have this universal call to holiness, right? We all want to get to heaven. Well, we should, right? And how do we get there? That's a really big question in terms of what vocation do I choose? And it's also not so much about what we choose. It's about how God is calling us. That's a huge part of it. But that's like one of the bigger things. And then once we decide, okay, this path I want to go down, then you have to choose, okay, who do I want to go down this path with? That's another huge decision, right? Wow. So there are some big decisions we have to make. But a lot of times in our lives, we're making literal millions of smaller decisions every day. And in my opinion, we don't have to put the same like intense discernment pressure on all little decisions or they will never be made.
That's a really good point.
Right? Like I see this so often in the Catholic dating space
Mm.
There's just well, there's two camps, for those who are serious about like dating for marriage, there's kind of this over discernment, even in like the pre-talking stage. It's like ridiculous. Like when you think about it outside of the context, right? And you're like, I'm sorry, what? You have to go discern to see if you should message this person? I'm like, that you lost me. Okay? Right? And it's way more common than you'd think. And it's like discernment is always happening, so we don't have to stop what we're doing to discern.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So it's like,
yeah.
Yeah.
And one thing that I'll just throw out there, I've been married for almost 10 years now. And so I've been out of the Catholic dating scene for quite a while. But I think it was last week, I saw this video. I forget where it was, but it was this video of nuns like running around being happy, like chopping wood. Like they were just doing things that looked like, I don't even know. I forget where I saw it, but it was somewhere. And my mind in that moment was like, did I discern incorrectly? Like, was I supposed to be a nun and not become a mom? Like, not get married? Like, and so obviously, no, because I'm here doing this with five kids. But I think I just want to normalize that like, even if you make the big decision or micro decisions, like your mind still brings up doubt. And so,
yes,
like, it's normal to have that doubt. And then to just remember, like, no, God's here. Even if I did make the wrong decision, like he's going to make good things come from it.
That is so huge. And I'm so glad you brought that up because I think about this all the time. Because here's what happens. People have that like feeling and then they're like, wait a second, I discerned wrong. And then they change course.
Yeah.
That's where it becomes dangerous. Mm-hmm. It's not dangerous to have those thoughts pop up. I mean, you had no control over that. Yeah. You have control over how you handle that thought, right? Mm-hmm. So if you were to have seen that and be like, oh, actually, I'm going to go join the Dominicans. It's like you're abandoning your husband and your family, and that's obviously not the path, right? That's an extreme example, but if you think about it in terms of like the smaller things, it's a lot harder to see. But in our world of, I keep harping on this because it's so relevant, of this instant gratification, and there's just like, because everything's online, like there are just a plethora of options. And I see this so often in the dating world where we treat even people as disposable options because we have an illusion that there are countless options out there for us. Mm-hmm. So, for example, you're in a dating app, you're just chit-chatting with somebody, and then, like, you're not anymore. You're just ghosting them. And it's like, okay, maybe that doesn't seem like such a big deal, but that's a person that you just disposed of because they didn't fit what, whatever your desire in that moment. Right? And that's different, by the way, than discerning, hey, this person has a future with someone else and not with me. That's different. Okay? Okay. We could go down so many rabbit holes, but we're not going to. But going back to that is discernment is helping you make a decision, right? Mm-hmm. But once you make that decision, you have to back that up. And a lot of times I work with a lot of in the marriage prep space, right? And a lot of people, especially in the modern world, where divorce is like everywhere, this idea of permanence of this vocation of choosing a person to marry is really hard for a lot of young people to grasp nowadays, like truly. And it scares me a little bit because I grew up having no problem with it because that's how I was taught from an early age. But people coming in with this idea that, well, divorce is everywhere. And like, yeah, the church is a little bit more strict, but it's not, they still don't get that it's forever, right? Yeah. It's that same question of you're just sitting around one day and you look up and Did I choose the wrong thing?
Yeah.
And so where all this kind of comes back together is that people are not disposable. First of all,
Yes.
our decisions are not disposable. And we have to honor the choices that we make. And the choices that we make, a lot of times the permanent ones, we have to choose over and over and over again, daily, hourly, every minute, whatever it takes to continue that path that you've forged.
Yeah.
Because we are very, very rarely, and I don't want people to mishear me here, not saying divorce is ever the answer, but we, like, in different contexts, very rarely are we asked to get off of our path completely and to change course.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not talking about vocationally, but like,
yeah, I know what you mean.
Career-wise, I just want to be overly clear. But that is like very rare. And yet as people, we're like, oh, but I am the exception to the rule, right? I'm unique, right? And the thing is, we are unique. But your vocation, your path in this world, that's what's unique.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to continually choose what you decide to choose continually. It just is a fact of life. And I need to preach that to the end of the earth because it's such a huge, I wonder if you have the same thoughts. Like, this culture is just ridden with decisions that they take back.
Yeah.
Or dispose of, at the earliest convenience because something else caught their eye.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. And I personally struggle a little bit with that, where I'm like, if I make it, because I work with my own coaches, and I will like make an investment, and like as soon as I do, I'm like, wait, is this a mistake? Even though I've already like done the logical thing, prayed about it, everything like that, and it's like I know that this is the right thing, but I'm like there might be something better.
Mm-hmm.
But as of right now, I just have to remind myself, like, no, God's putting this in front of me. Not that thing that might be better, this right now, because this is what I need.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, too, what you said about, like, ghosting people, I think is so important for everyone to think about because, again, a lot of times, and I know some of it is not intentional. Like sometimes you like literally just forget to message people back or email people. I know I have. But I think so much of that comes down to like we're afraid to hurt other people's feelings or we're afraid to say no. And so instead of just saying like, I'm not interested or like, you can't offer me what I need or whatever it is, you just stop talking. When in reality, that's not giving the other person like the good critical feedback that they need in order to maybe adjust what it is that they're saying or adjust their offering or whatever it is. And so the kindest thing, instead of just ghosting them, would actually be to say like, I'm not actually interested in working with you, or I'm not actually interested in going on a date with you. It doesn't mean that like you are bad or what you're offering is bad. It's not what I need right now.
Yeah.
And I think if more of us can just do the work of stepping up and saying like, no, or saying yes, whatever it is, then that would help so many people to understand, first off, that hearing a yes or a no is not really about themselves. It says more about the other person.
Yes.
And what that other person needs in the moment. Maybe they don't need you right now. But that doesn't mean that they should have the right to, like you said, just ghost you. And I think that's something important to remember in any area of life.
Yeah, no, that's so true. And it's just really, there's like two things. Like there's a quote by Brene Brown and she says, clear is kind.
Yes.
And I just think about that all the time in terms of like, it is so much kinder to just be clear with the person you're dealing with instead of ghosting them. Like it honors them and it honors you and your needs.
Yes.
And that is so overlooked. It truly is. Like, because if we're thinking about like going back to presence, right? Being present with another person also includes honoring who they are because you're seeing them, right? And so you are trying, like, if you're distracted when there's someone in front of you having a conversation, you're not honoring who they are.
Yeah.
But if you're being present with them and your phone's down and you are interacting with them, you're honoring their personhood, right? And so we have to have that same mentality even when the person's not in front of us.
Yeah.
Right? Whether they're you're talking over email, right? Messaging, whatever it looks like in the digital space, I think especially is where it's hard. You have to remember that there's a human on the other end of the line, and you have to honor who they are. And the second thing is the truth will set you free. Mm-hmm. Truly. Like, I've been in situations where you're hesitant to speak up, right? To say the truth of how you're feeling. And it just is kind of uncomfortable for everyone. It's like, it would just be so simpler.
I know, right?
So much simpler. And like bring like a breath of fresh air if you were just like, I know this might be hard to hear, but this is how I'm feeling. And like the peace that comes from those conversations after they're done, not during, okay, I will take it out. But after they're done is like, yeah, that was the right choice.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, no, 100%. And I know it's so hard because a lot of the clients that I work with, they come to me with birth trauma issues, mm-hmm. but what's really at the root of those, well, not even at the root, but what's actually underneath of that birth trauma is more of like mother and father wounds.
Yeah.
And so they've never been like taught or allowed to express themselves fully. Yeah. So therefore, whenever they go into their birth or even motherhood, they don't know how to express themselves because they were never allowed to.
And it's compounded.
Yes.
And so at this point, instead of it just being about a hard or traumatic birth, it is
everything.
About so much more, right? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, we could keep chatting. So all the rabbit holes.
Yes.
We should wrap up because I'm sure my kids are getting into something that they're not supposed to be. So before I ask you where people can find you, one last question that I always ask guests is, what is the most important piece of wisdom you'd share with the discerning mother?
And it's funny because we talked about it a lot already, but that is just like, be present, be where your feet are. Because like mentally and physically, like join those together, like be where your feet are. Yeah. That will help you make the clearest choices, because a lot of times when you're making choices, our human nature will try to get us not to make a choice to do something new, because the uncomfortableness of doing the new thing seems harder than staying where you're at, right? And something that being present does is that it takes into account where you are and the truth of that situation, and maybe the things that are uncomfortable about it, and like thinking through the process of becoming the person that you want to be to get over here. Mm-hmm. And by being present, you have a clearer idea of, okay, if I choose this because I want that result and I have to become this person to get that result, it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be hard, but I can willingly choose it instead of just being stuck in fear of the unknown. Mm-hmm. And that's like literally only one of the things that being present can help you with. But in this, view of the discerning mother, I think that is the most underrated thing you can do that will make the biggest impact. Is to be present. For sure.
But it's so hard sometimes.
It is. Oh my gosh, it is.
All right. Okay, so how can listeners connect with you and your work? Like, where can they find you?
Yeah, so I'm on socials at Let's Be Saints Co. And then my website is letsbesaintsco.com. So wherever you can find me on the internet, that would be what to search.
Cool. Yeah, and the websites that you have are beautiful, by the way. So definitely check them out just to see how beautiful they are.
Thank you. I designed them all myself. So
they're beautiful.
That is a huge compliment.
Well, thank you so much. And again, it was just a great conversation. We could keep chatting forever and ever down all the rabbit holes, but that was so awesome. And definitely check out her links and maybe connect with her on Instagram. All right. We'll see you guys later.
Thank you so much for having me.